Hello, my name's Gavin. This is Genre Books, and the first week, extended week of Garbaugust has finished. I don't normally do a weekly roundup. Sometimes life intrudes, sometimes the books are too long, sometimes it's a bit busy at work to be able to fill a video with what I've read in a particular week. I'm going to make an exception for Garbaugust. The books are usually on the shorter side. They are relatively undemanding, and we've got some weekly prompts to keep up to. I also have to show progress on my Garbingo card. Now, there's quite a lot marked off there, but that's because some of these books have fulfilled more than one purpose. And I think I'm going to have real problems when it comes to the last couple of squares on this, but I'm going to give it my best shot. The prompt for this first week, which is the 1st to the 10th of August, is anything goes. And I think what I've read has fulfilled that in spades. But let's go through. I'll talk about the second thing I read during the week first, because I've already made a video on that, and that was Spicy Stories. Spicy Stories from September 1933, which was quite a long-standing pulp magazine. And the stories in there are not many stories, they're all fairly short stories, interspersed with some fantastically terrible advertisements and surprisingly actual nude photography, which was a new one for pulp magazines for me. Their pixelated glory can be found on that video. On the Garbingo card, Spicy Stories counts for nudity on the cover. It's only a drawn picture. There is no full nudity. It's very much implied that it's about to happen. The other category it fulfills is one of the stories in Spicy Stories is called Those Country Gals! Exclamation mark. So I'm having that as well, just in case I don't get to another exclamation mark in the remainder of the month. Spicy Stories also fulfills a long-running series, which is, I think, a box I'm going to tick on a number of occasions, but I've crossed it off here based on the fact that there are 117 issues of Spicy Stories. But the actual first book I read for Garbaugust was F Rivkin, Silverglass. Now, I was expecting very cheesy, given the 1980s cover with a lovely 80s haircut and headband, and it didn't disappoint. But I think it was a slightly different book to maybe what I was expecting. This is just pretty much straight fantasy with a couple of perpetually horny female protagonists. I don't think it rewrites the rules of fantasy, but I don't think it breaks many of them either. It's very readable. The world building is not overbearing. There's a lightness of touch there, and it again doesn't make any great strides for innovation, but it becomes a sort of, it's a familiar fantasy realm. If you think in terms of Fritz Leiber and Farford and the Grey Mouse books, you are probably not going vastly wrong. And indeed, Leiber says, well, I say some nice things. One nice thing, it's a open roading romance, he says. Has all the hallmarks of a very cold piece from a review there. But this did tick a couple of boxes on the Garbingo card. To begin with, J.F. Rivkin. We don't know who J.F. Rivkin is. I don't know who J.F. Rivkin is. It is commonly assumed this is a pseudonym, but for who we do not know. So, pseudonym ticked off. I also read this at home because this was a book I'm not going to read on the bus, or in my case, the train. Yeah. The next book I read, also written under a pseudonym, but at least we know who this was. But we'll stick with the pseudonym, and it is Sax Rohmer's The Bride of Fu Manchu. Now this is a nice copy from Titan Books. Again, pulp, readable, proper adventure stuff. And for the Garbingo card, this ticks off the cults category. There is a cult around Fu Manchu, the Si Fan. I've got to say, I'm pleased that it wasn't more racist than it was. I was really expecting proper yellow peril stuff, and it's there, but just not in the quantities that I was fearing. And I think along most of this book, with the obvious fear everyone has of Fu Manchu and his devious activities, there's proper sort of grudging respect there. There's obviously absolute respect and devotion from the people he has drugged and brought into his cult of the Si Fan. But even from his enemies, there is a realization that they are dealing with a genius. The hero has an unlikely background. He's an American, Scottish, recovering botanist who caught black fever in South America and is convalescing in the place where all of the convalescing botanists go, Monte Carlo. He's under the care of the hero of the Fu Manchu books that have gone before. But in this book, he takes on that role himself. People are dying mysteriously. It's some biological warfare. Well, I'll say in the air, literally and metaphorically, which is probably an actual real concern in the early 1930s when this was published. And it's a book that throws everything onto the page. You have devious villains, you have femme fatales, you have secret bases on islands, you have the military roped in to help resolve issues, you have a chief of police trying to be helpful and having limitations, you have correct interference from the officers of state in Her Majesty's or His Majesty's government, and you have a dastardly plot to take over the world by engineering a disease which kills only white men. This is the first Fu Manchu I've read, and if I see more on a shelf somewhere, I think I'm probably going to pick them up. They are great pulpy fun. Usual pulp rules apply. There are racist elements here. This is of its time. This is now the 2020s. We don't fret about diseases coming from China. Because I finished The Bride of Fu Manchu this week, that was my pick, my last pick from the tote bag of Mild Peril. Now, it's been a while since I've done a pick because I was waiting to read this one in Garbaugust. So for those who may be new to the channel, in order to get some books from these shelves read that I would not otherwise choose, and this is a random way of picking the next one. And because this is genre books and to put a bit of extra peril into the mix. I've also got, I think, about 100 cards with various genres or subgenres written on there that I will read something from should I pick them. So I may well be reading some category romance. I may well be reading some Amish romance. This has already led me to read the Maria Monk book because I chose a misery literature. That was pure algorithmic Viagra. But let's see what the bag throws up this time. You're seeing it before I am. John Kennedy Toole, Confederacy of Dunces. Hey, I have wanted to read that, so, that's good. So, I'll find that book in the shelves somewhere and see if I can get that read within the next few weeks. Given everything else I'm reading at the moment, it's a tall order, but I've wanted to read that book for a while, and now I'm being told by random chance to do so. The next book is one I had not intended to be reading for Garbaugust, although it does fit right in, and I was probably persuaded to read it by seeing lots of other people picking it for their lists as well. And it's The Rats by James Herbert. I read this when I was 14, and I'm surprised at how much of it I did remember from reading it. I'm not a great rereader, but this actually might persuade me to reread some more books because I got a lot of fun out of this one. It's Herbert's first novel, and I think if you are being realistic, you can tell, but that doesn't stop it being really exciting. The hero is a trifle dull. For a teacher, he seems very hyper capable in dealing with many situations. But I think the real standout in this book, apart from the action sequences, which are excellent, are the little vignettes, the little character sketches of people are not going to see it through to the end of the chapter. Anyone watching from Britain, think of the first 5 minutes of any episode of Casualty, but with each of those cold openings ending with an attack of mutant rats. Another 2 boxes of the Garbingo card crossed off by the following, and that is When the Kissing Had to Stop by Constantine FitzGibbon. There are, as you can see, far more than 2 guns on this front cover, and this is also a novel that concerns itself a little bit with moral panic. But there is another panic more prevalent here, and that is, the Reds are coming. This is a book of communist invasion, and I chose this back in, I think, probably at the end of June, the beginning of July to read. And a fair amount has happened in the country since then. In this book, a Labour government finally takes power after 3 terms of Conservatives in power. In this book, there are race riots on the streets of Britain. This book is 64 years old, and when I first started reading it, it just felt like I'm reading the Daily Mail's reporting of the current situation in this country. And I think this whole book is a Daily Mail, Daily Telegraph fever dream of all their worst nightmares and their dreams for increasing circulation of their papers covered. It's totally overblown. I think it's a little knowing in that regard as well. There are flashes of humour there. He pokes fun at some of the characters who are presenting points of view the author disagrees with. And he makes absolute caricatures of them. The Soviets are absolute cardboard cutout villains. Parts of the book are initially set in one of the gulags. The officials in the Kremlin are petrified of their leader. The Americans in the book are just really portrayed in terms of the money that they represent. And there are a few points in the book where some characters say, this is as much of an invasion, it's just that they're coming in and taking over all of the companies. Now, the quotes from the Daily Mail on the front cover here compares this book to 1984 or Brave New World in glowing terms. So, it puts these books into the shade. That is so wide of the mark, it's unbelievable. What this book is a warning from the author never to ever vote Labour, because they're useful idiots who will invite the worst of humanity into our country. I think this book tries to do a number of things at the same time and as such fails. As a thriller, it's a little bit hackneyed. As a political treatise, it's relying on the straw man arguments it's throwing into the mix. As a warning about societal decline, it doesn't resolve the issues. And as a warning about imminent invasion, it just tries to squeeze too much into too short a time frame. The fun is trying to guess who the characters may be based on. If I had more knowledge about 1960s and late 50s politics, I would probably have a better idea. As it is, I was able to sort of visualize some of the characters as contemporary politicians, and the whole useful idiots trope does apply. If you don't take this book seriously, I think it's a blast. I think if you did take this seriously, you may as well just go back to reading the Daily Mail. Still, moral panic and guns on the cover crossed off the list. The last book I finished is Reginald Brentnor's The Schimmelhorn File, Memoirs of a Dirty Old Genius. And I think the only box this ticks off is weirdly specific subgenre. It's a collection of stories of our main character, Papal Schimmelhorn, who doesn't actually have horns. We don't know how old he is. He's certainly in his 80s, but he appears to be sometimes older, and he appears physically to be sometimes younger. He is a subconscious genius physicist. He's a genius, he's a lech, but he comes up with the solutions. Brentnor certainly had an idea of what he wanted to write, and you can tell this because the first story I think was printed in 1950 and the last comes out in 1976 or 78, and there seems to be over a quarter of a century or more absolutely no development of the characters. He has them where he wants them. I think as a comedy, it quite often misses the mark. Comedy accents, he's Swiss, by the way. Comedy accents never do it for me. And because he's Swiss, there are cuckoo clocks in almost every story. Papa Schimmelhorn works for a cuckoo clock company, the owners of which are constantly exasperated by him. I think possibly the one word to describe this is screwball. and Screwball is not my favourite kind of comedy. So as a comedy, it sort of leaves me cold. But as a collection of science fiction short stories, I think they're sort of inventive enough to be, readable. I also noticed something in the first story of the book, which is called The Nurs Come from the Woodwork Out. The USA is at war with Bobovia, and Papa Schimmelhorn turns up to the Pentagon to show them his secret weapon to win the war. The weapon is a bassoon. When he plays this bassoon, animals come out, these Nurs come out of the woodwork and start devouring stuff. Guns, but mostly clothing, because it's that kind of book. And this is, a little bit of Pied Piper-ish stuff. When he plays another tune, or he plays the same tune in reverse, they all go back into the woodwork. But this is the method by which they're going to win the war. When he is quizzed as to where these animals come from, he says yesterday. And at that point, a little light goes off in my head, and I'm thinking, well, these Nurs are just Stephen King's The Langoliers. These are animals who come in and eat yesterday. So in this story, they're coming in and they're devouring everything from today because they've been bought from yesterday. In the Langoliers, these are flying chainsaw-toothed animals that devour the previous day. So they'll never get us because we're in today, but yesterday has just been consumed. These are animals that consumed yesterday that have been brought forward to today. So, Mr. King, I'm watching you. I saw what you did. But I think as Swiss cuckoo clock technician, subconscious physics genius, horny old man, that is weirdly specific subgenre. I've also started, but not finished, Jalav, Amazon Warrior. I will hopefully get more of this read during the next week, but I have a pile of adventure books I want to get done. The last piece that I've not finished, but I am continuing to read throughout the month, is The Mushroom Jungle, History of Post-War Paperback Publishing in the UK. This is great so far, picking up a lot of information, filling in some gaps of my knowledge, and I'll probably be doing a video on some Mushroom Press books later in Garbaugust. So we're into week 2 of Garbaugust as of this morning, and for me that is going to be Men's Adventure. I'm sorry, category romance, I'm not reading you, and I'll check in next week to see how much I got read. Until then, bye.